Greetings and welcome to In-Depth. I'm Dike Rostant. One of the traditions around many of our festivals, Christmas included, is an increase in the food we eat. Now, while not everything that good to eat, good to talk, we are happy to have a discussion on healthy eating with registered dietitian and the secretary of the Trinidad and Tobago Association of Nutritionists and Dietitians, Cherice Bronte-Tinkew. Greetings, ma'am, and thank you for making the time. Do you find many people wanting to talk to you, either clients or even family members, around Christmas time and the season?
Well, funny enough, yes, especially with the carnival season coming up, I find more and more persons seeking advice, even trying to even control their different health conditions.
And looking at some of those conversations, definitely we're not going trying to go into specific ones, but what are they kind of ranging around if you want to have them in thematical groupings?
Well, I do find that persons coming, well, to me, I do see a lot of persons with diabetes. I see persons who are trying to lose weight, manage their weight. Some may require it for certain jobs. So you do have the lifestyle conditions appearing more and more these days, and persons are seeking to better their health with diet and exercise.
And in terms of those lifestyle conditions, what does a season like Christmas, where you have a lot of rich food, sometimes you have increased eating, what are some of the things that you want individuals to know where you have the season meeting up with some of these lifestyle conditions?
Well, first of all, when you come to a dietitian, we usually do a full assessment and we try to encourage persons to have the Caribbean six food groups. And the food groups consist of staples, legumes, food from animals, vegetables, fruits, and fats and oils. So, taking in mind these food groups, we want to make sure that we're having a variety, we're having a balance, but we're not overindulging. Because around this time, you find a lot of persons have very highly seasoned foods. They may have a lot of different meat options on the table. They may even have a lot of foods that increase in fat or sugar. So it's very, very key to try to stick to a regular routine around this time. And overindulging, you have to portion or control yourself as much as possible.
Is control you saying right about now? All right. But I like the fact that you talk about the Caribbean six food groups, because I think sometimes when you see diets from different places, they may not have the same sort of groupings. So what are some of the main differences that you would say between the Caribbean six food groups as opposed to something that you would find a little further from our shores?
Well, we are very lucky to have a wide range of staples. So we do include a lot of our ground provisions in this group. So they include things like your edos, your cassava, your dasheen, yam, even some of these starchy vegetables such as your green fig or breadfruit, even plantain. So we have a wide variety, and these are very rich in some vitamins and minerals. So it's very important we take advantage of this, and we could incorporate this in our balanced meals as well. So for instance, if you want to have maybe a staple to go along with your turkey this Christmas, you can have things like, if you have your breadfruit roasted, or if you have some of your yam or green fig, you can make a pie to go along with that.
And sometimes they say it's not what you say, but it's how you say it. And we might be having the same breadfruit or yam, or does the way that we have it make a difference? Because I can see one thing, okay, well, it's roasted versus someone having to process it a little more, possibly even bring it down to a flour to carry it back up to something. Does the way that we treat with some of these starches or carbohydrates affect how it is they react in our systems?
Definitely. So, a lot of our cooking methods we have to be very careful of, because it might include a lot of fat or it might include a lot of sodium. So, for instance, if you're preparing, let's say, a grung provision pie, some good options to use would be like low fat milk instead of your full cream milk. If you're adding cheeses, you won't want to add two and three different types of cheeses. Maybe just choose one. And then you could also include things like your vegetables. So you can have a colorful pie, and this will include a lot of other vitamins and minerals here. So you can bake them if you just want to roast them, and then you roast your vegetables at the side. That doesn't require a lot of ingredients. So we are usually just having as close to the natural sources as possible.
As close to natural sources as possible, and that really kind of hits home in terms of, because many times you want to dress up something. I remember there was a conversation yesterday, well, the rice is not rice for Christmas because it doesn't have raisins in it. So in terms of like some of those things that they kind of slip under the radar because they just put in without realizing, okay, well, we need to kind of account for some of these things that we're doing. Is there a way or rules of thumb that you would have for saying, okay, well, yes, these are the portions, but also these are some of the things to look at when it is you're putting in, even if you're looking at, you have smaller portions or larger portions. What are some of those things that we need to be mindful of just before we go to that break?
So a good tip would be like you can look at your plate, it's a round plate, and you can divide it into sections. And for a person, who is managing their weight or, managing their blood sugars, you can look at filling that plate with probably quarter of your staples. So maybe that pie, maybe a few pot spoons of rice can go into that area. And then the other areas where you would fill up with your protein sources, then you might have a lot of your vegetables, because all of this helps with managing a lot of lifestyle diseases. So variety on the plate is important, but a good tip is just keeping quarter of that plate for your staples. And don't forget, this is just one meal. So you have breakfast, you have lunch, you have dinner. If you want to divide that however you want, you can have different meals throughout the day. It doesn't have to be a whole feast, so to say.
And sometimes people talk about feast or famine, but I also want to get back to portion control versus calories in the portions. We do that when we return. We are speaking with registered dietitian Cherice Bronte-Tinkew. Stay with us. We return with more. Welcome back. We are looking at how we're eating during this season and beyond. We're doing so with registered dietitian Cherice Bronte-Tinkew. And just before we took the break, you were talking about some of the things we can look at on our portions, and a quarter for this place, a quarter for that place. But what about, and you spoke to it a little bit before, sometimes when you layer something and there's so much that goes into it that it may be a quarter of the plate or it may be even less, but there's so many calories, there's so many things, components in that thing going into that quarter. And just let's look at the pie again, for instance. So yes, there's low-fat options that you said can go into them, but are there different ways that we can look at some of the portions that we put on our plate? Because I know some people might say, well, all them veggies, they take a whole meal,
Yes, I know sometimes when persons think of the vegetables, we're just thinking of a big salad. But in fact, we have a lot of different vegetables in our region too. So maybe look at the options of having things like the green peas, the even the melanjan, the bodi, pak choy, spinach, callaloo. Callaloo has your okra, it has your pumpkin. All of this would count as your vegetable intake. Again, we are trying to be mindful of the cooking methods that we're doing. So we're trying not to use a lot of fat or a lot of salt or even a lot of sugar. All right. So we want a variety on the plate. So maybe if you're not feeling too keen on the salad, let's say we just go for some cooked vegetables. You have like a pot spoon or two of your callaloo. and then you have some, roasted vegetables at the side. Maybe it's just like maybe carrots mixed with a bit of spinach, yeah. Or even if you're feeling fancy and you grew something in your backyard and you have that lovely cauliflower popping out, then you could probably use that.
If you're feeling fancy, yes, I like that. But what are some of those factors that we need to be mindful of when considering a new diet? Because many times you may kind of have you may be starting something. So whether or not you're intermittent fasting, whether or not you're trying something that is a lot more liquid based, how do we really say, okay, well, I'm going to try this, but I am doing this mindful of some of the other things that I need to be? What are some of those other things that we need to be mindful of?
Well, as you touch on that, there are a lot of different trends going around. So we call them the fad diets. So you mentioned a few, you might go on a liquid diet, or you might have fasting, intermittent fasting. Some people are cutting out different food groups. And we don't encourage this. We try to make sure that persons are getting a wide variety. So this is why it's so important to speak to the experts. Like myself, a registered dietitian, we are trained in making sure that we do a complete assessment. But a few questions to ask yourself would be: is this sustainable? Is this something that I can afford? Is it something that is going to allow me to get all the different nutrients I need? One of these steps is just by looking at the Caribbean food groups. And there is a lovely chart. You can check it online and you can pick and choose different options from it. We do emphasis on a lot of um, less sugar options, less fat options, and less salt, because these are three components where if it's too high, they can lead to lifestyle diseases.
And thank you for that. One of the reasons I ask is because I find that intermittent fasting, or sometimes people don't even like to use the word fasting, but just looking and saying, okay, well, I'm eating between a certain window. That works for me. But at the same time, if I'm preparing breakfast for the children, I might take a little taste to see how it tastes, because you want them to appreciate it and eat it. And so in terms of like those circumstances, saying, okay, well, this works for me, that doesn't work for me, or if they're saying, okay, well, a diet is calling for this sweetener or whatever like that, and you're saying, okay, well, I may not have the money to buy that, but I can afford this. And I guess that goes back to one of the things you were saying, consulting with the experts. What are some of the things that we need to be mindful of when we're reaching out to a registered dietitian? Is it that we need to get an idea of what we've been eating over time, tracking it? Is it that it's going to be a one-off visit? What is the process? I want to eat better, and I reach out to a registered dietitian. What are some of those things that describe that process for me? Thank you.
So, yes, so we will do a full assessment, and this assessment usually would have to get a lot of background information. So we're going to ask a bit about, your socioeconomics. And we're also going to look at your timing. What is your schedule like? We're also going to be asking you, what is your meal pattern, like your typical meal pattern? We would like to know the quantities. So it might have a lot of different questions involved in doing that. So we're actually probing, trying to find out how much are you actually eating, and are you maintaining it, or are you a person that is having less of something, or you're having more of something. So therefore we go and we identify the different problems, and then we go into a lot of different counseling techniques. So it involves, explaining a bit about the food groups and knowing what are the correct items that you can use, or maybe the affordable, the sustainable items, things that you can also include for the entire family. Because we're dealing with, a lot of persons living with others, and we have to do a compromise sometimes.
Well, that's one of the things I wanted to ask as well, because this person may be allergic to this person may love that, as opposed to the other person can't stand it. But so thank you for that. how do we marry physical activity with diet though? Because it's one thing to say, okay, well, we're putting in good stuff or we're a little more mindful of what it is we're eating, ingesting, but where does physical activity come into that? Is that something that registered dietitians speak to at all?
Yes, we do encourage, and a lot of us, we are certified too. So we're able to give a lot of information when it comes to exercising, how much exercise, or even, recommending different types. So we do have persons who are certified, but basically you do want to getting regular physical activity. It can be a hobby, it can be an exercise routine. If you're able to go to the gym, you have to know if you're going to stick to that program. And a simple tip would be like 30 minutes, 3 to 5 times a week. Try to, get your heart rate up. If you're able to include things like resistance training, that will help your muscle conditioning as well.
And are there certain types of activities that you'd recommend more for certain types of diets or outcomes that people are looking forward to in terms of if someone is bulking up versus if someone is trying to lose, if someone has joints that the high impact activity is not necessarily their cup of tea? I know you said you have people who are, many of you are certified to deal with that. What are some of those things that we can say, okay, well, this is a general guide, this is a general guide?
Yeah, so there are different persons, with different medical conditions or even the ability to do certain exercises. So you may have to work alongside, like let's say if you're not able to run or walk long distances, you can work with persons like physiotherapists, so they can tell you what simple exercises you could do, like their chair exercises, their follow along videos where you can stay on one spot, or even like, just making sure you're doing a extra walk with the family and friends, especially around this time, the season. After having such a rich meal, it's not a problem to just go out, take a 20 minutes around the block, have a little chat with the family and friends.
All right, so we want to thank you so much, Cherice Bronte-Tinkew, registered dietitian. All the best for the season and beyond as people reach out to you to be a little more conscious and mindful and healthy about what it is we are ingesting. And on behalf of our entire news team, I'm Dike Rostant. This has been In Depth with me. Thank you so much for joining us.